sorry, you'll have to use the staff entrance in the back." The sentence didn't just cut through the air of the plaza's grand hall. It tore open an invisible line, one that still divides the world by color, origin, and privilege. The man speaking was Daniel Reed, 26, freshly tailored suit tie, knotted just tight enough to suggest professionalism. His eyes, even without looking up, carried the quiet confidence of someone certain he was standing exactly where he belonged. In his hand was a guest list embossed with the shining logo of the Whitmore Capital Summit Gala, gleaming like a ticket to heaven for the elite. Standing before him was Dr. Maya Carter, 38, CEO of Nexus Partners. She wore a simple, deep blue dress, perfectly cut, the stitching precise and elegant, tracing the grace of her figure. Her dark hair was pinned neatly up a few strands, falling softly beside her cheek. The chandelier light danced across her brown skin, blending her into the golden shimmer of the room. But all Daniel saw was someone who didn't belong. She didn't respond right away. Like a violin string drawn tight, Maya simply looked at him, a calm, steady gaze that made the other person lose confidence first. Inside, though, her heart pounded, not from fear, but from familiarity. Familiar with those looks, familiar with that tone, familiar with the feeling of being misplaced, even when standing exactly where she was supposed to be. The plaza's ballroom glimmered with luxury gowns sweeping across marble diamonds, twinkling like stars against velvet collars. The scent of Chanel No. 5 mingled with the soft clinking of champagne glasses into a symphony of arrogance. This was no place for the faint of heart. Here every smile was a mask, every greeting a test of status. Daniel pointed toward the back door, where servers hurried down the corridor carrying silver trays. "That way, ma'am," he said, emphasizing ma'am with a touch of disdain. "Thank you," Maya replied quietly, her tone soft yet unshakable. "But I'm already at the right entrance." Daniel frowned finally, lifting his head, his eyes sweeping over her with a chill of contempt. "I'm afraid there's been a mistake. This event is private invitation only." He drew out the word private, erecting a golden boundary line with his voice. Before Maya could answer, a cold voice sliced in from behind. "Daniel, what's happening? We can't afford interruptions. Not tonight." The woman approaching was Eleanor Whitmore, 72 years old, the uncrowned queen of Wall Street. Her silver hair was wound into a perfect bun, a triple strand of pearls encircling her neck, each one worth a Manhattan apartment. She advanced with the slow, deliberate gravity of someone carrying both power and legacy. Eleanor studied Maya with a mix of curiosity and disdain. "And you are Maya Carter," she said evenly. "I'm here for the Whitmore Capital Summit Gala." The older woman's voice lowered into a small, patronizing laugh. "Ah, I see. Are you with the orchestra, or perhaps the floral arrangements?" The air thickened into silence. A few guests turned to look, lips curling faintly. Maya felt every stare, not curiosity, but confirmation, as if each gaze was asking whether she truly belonged. She drew a deep breath and took out a thick invitation card embossed with the Whitmore Capital logo and lined with fine gold trim. "I believe this is an official invitation," she said. Eleanor pinched the card between two fingers, as though it might stain her skin. Reading aloud, she said, "Dr. Maya Carter, CEO, Nexus Partners." "Oh, what an unusual name. I don't recall inviting anyone by that." She turned to Daniel, her voice loud enough for nearby guests to hear. There must have been a mix-up in the mailing list. From the corners of the room, curious glances began to converge. Maya felt the weight pressing down heavy as stone, but she stood tall chin, lifted her eyes locked on Eleanor's. "I was invited by Goldman Sachs," she said calmly. "I'm sure you'll soon understand why." For a moment, Eleanor's smile froze, but the silence shattered when a man's commanding voice rang out from the ballroom. "Mother, what's going on?" "Preston Whitmore." The 445 CEO of the Whitmore Empire strode out, tall salt and pepper hair, Savile Row suit fitting like a second skin. Every movement carried the ease of a man born to command. "A woman is claiming to be a CEO invited to the gala," Eleanor said, half amused, half scornful. Preston's gaze landed on Maya, sharp and cold. "Really, you think you belong here?" He laughed. "This isn't a charity dinner. This is where the families that built America come together. You can't just walk in and call yourself a partner." Maya said nothing. She simply observed him, as if measuring the depth of an abyss. She knew she was standing in the wolf's den, every eye tearing at her presence, searching for a flaw. In the leather portfolio she held was a USB drive containing all data on a $1.2 billion deal suspended between Whitmore and Goldman Sachs. One signal and the entire agreement could change direction. But not yet. She needed them to expose themselves to build their own noose from their arrogance. "And what did you say you are again?" Preston asked with a raised brow. "COO of Nexus Partners," Maya replied, her tone steady, her eyes fierce. "And tonight I'm here by invitation from Goldman." The hall went silent. Scattered laughter dissolved into thick, pride-laden air. Daniel glanced at Preston, awaiting orders. Eleanor folded her arms, her lips pressed into a fine, cold line. Then Preston laughed, his voice echoing across the marble. "Goldman. Our partners are names with history, not some startup riding on diversity hires." He stretched those last two words, diversity hires, just loud enough for everyone to hear. A chill ran down Maya's spine, not from humiliation, but from knowing she had heard enough. Beneath her calm surface, a storm began to form, silent, yet ferocious. She tightened her grip on her phone, her thumb brushing lightly over the sensor, recording active. She wouldn't need to shout. She wouldn't need to argue. All she had to do was prove it. In that moment, among people drunk on legacy and money, Maya Carter understood that tonight would not just be a gala. It would be the funeral of an empire far too used to looking down on others. Laughter cracked from several corners of the room, sharp and brittle, like glass breaking. Faces once masked in power, now fractured, exposing curiosity and disdain beneath the polish. Someone whispered, "Nexus, what never heard of it?" Another voice snickered, "Probably some vegan startup." The whispers blended with the clinking of glasses, forming a melody of mockery, sweet to everyone but her. Maya Carter stood motionless, tall and steady like a pillar in a storm. Inside, every insult felt like a pebble tossed into still water. It rippled for a moment, then disappeared without changing the current. She wasn't here to be accepted. She was here to prove. Eleanor Whitmore raised a manicured hand toward the hotel manager, her voice quiet but sharp as ice. "Handle this, Daniel. Quickly, before she disturbs the guests." From behind, eyes followed like spectators at a play whose ending they already knew. Daniel nodded and started forward, but Maya spoke first. "Before you do that," she said softly, her voice light as breath, yet cutting through the entire hall, "there's one thing I'd like to clarify." She opened her purse, pulled out the invitation card, and a small metal badge etched by laser with the words, "Goldman Sachs Primary Partner Access." Placing it on the reception counter, the metal caught the chandelier's light. "I was invited by Goldman," she said evenly. "If you'd like to verify, I'll wait." Eleanor laughed, a slow, deliberate laugh that fractured into short, dismissive notes. "Goldman Sachs invited you. How fascinating. We should call them right now to confirm that. Preston." Preston Whitmore IV folded his arms, lips curving in amusement, as if she had just told the worst joke of the night. "No need, Mother. I know Goldman. I speak with them every week. If they'd invited a new partner, I would certainly know." He stepped closer, the click of his leather shoes sharp against the marble. "Miss Carter, I'm not sure what you're trying to achieve here, but I'd suggest ending this little charade before it goes too far." Maya looked at him, her gaze calm, yet fathomless, cutting through the layers of authority he wore like armor. "A charade," she repeated softly, each word falling like a drop of water onto steel. "Perhaps you're right. But this charade didn't start with me." A faint shiver moved through the crowd. The way she spoke, quiet, measured smiling, made them uneasy. "That's enough." Eleanor snapped her voice, slicing through the air like a blade through silk. "We can't allow a stranger to disrupt this evening. Daniel, call security." From the far side of the room, 2 security guards in black suits began moving toward her. Maya didn't move. Her eyes lowered briefly to the phone in her hand. Her thumb slid gently across the screen, mic on. A small smile appeared at the corner of her lips, part bitter, part cold. "I only have one question," she said. "The partnership deal between Whitmore Holdings and Goldman Sachs, worth $1.2 billion, it's still underway, isn't it?" Preston frowned. "How do you know?" "Because," she interrupted smoothly, "it's my company Nexus Partners that's providing the counterfunding in that very deal." The room froze. The gala music from the ballroom cut off completely. The guests who had been laughing seconds earlier now seemed unable to breathe. Daniel blinked, fumbling with the list in his hands. Eleanor stepped forward slowly, her voice still carrying authority, but with the faintest tremor beneath it. "This is a serious misunderstanding. Goldman would never partner with an organization we've never heard of." Maya tilted her head slightly, her tone gentle, but her eyes sharp as glass. "Perhaps because you've never needed to listen, Mrs. Whitmore. But the market listens, and Goldman listens very closely." Preston let out a hollow laugh, echoing across the hall. "I've heard plenty of people try to insert themselves into major deals, but this is the first time I've seen someone invent their own role. Miss Carter, I strongly advise you to leave before this becomes a stain." Maya didn't answer. She unlocked her phone, opened a message, and her fingers moved so quickly that to anyone watching it was just a flash of blue light. The message sent encrypted, straight to Nexus headquarters in Zurich. 3 words only: "Activate Jericho Protocol." At that instant, the unseen gears of global finance began to turn. No one in that hall realized that one small message had just lit the fuse that would tear apart an empire that believed itself untouchable. In Maya's mind, each face around her was etched clearly: Eleanor Preston, Daniel, Dr. Thorne, all the people who had laughed, nodded, and condescended. They didn't know that every word, every glance was now evidence, not merely of personal humiliation, but of how power rots from within when it forgets to respect humanity. A cold draft slipped through the hall, making the curtains tremble softly. No one seemed to notice, but Maya felt it like a sign. "Miss Whitmore," she said, her tone suddenly tender. "You know the difference between an invitation and an exclusion. Sometimes it's just a single line in an email. She turned, picked her invitation back up from the counter. I won't keep you any longer. You'll have a very long evening ahead. Preston clenched his fists and stepped forward. Are you threatening us? No, Maya smiled, just reminding you. Their eyes met his, filled with inherited arrogance, passed down through 4 generations, and hers shaped by the quiet strength forged from blood and endurance. Preston didn't know why, but for an instant, he felt cold. From the far corner, a few guests whispered. A silver-haired man, CEO of Sterling Hedge Fund, shook his head. People like her always think they can challenge order. Just wait and see. Dr. Thorne added his voice, dripping with false wisdom. She'll soon learn the market doesn't forgive illusions. Maya turned and walked past them. Each step echoed like a hammer, striking the walls of an old empire. She knew the game had just begun. She knew they still didn't understand, but in a few hours their world would shake from its foundation. And that night, as the chandeliers of the plaza still shimmered and the glasses still lifted to toast legacies and prestige, a single command from a data center in Zurich would reroute $1.2 billion to another destination. Maya walked out of the hall, leaving behind laughter tinged with doubt. On her lips, the faintest smile, the smile of someone who knows dawn is coming, and with it, an empire will collapse in silence. The lights inside the plaza's grand hall reflected off the crystal panels like an artificial sky, a sky where stars weren't born, but bought with power and money. Inside that glittering universe, the gala continued, as if nothing had happened. The deep hum of a cello drifted through the air. The soft clinking of champagne glasses mingled with the hollow laughter of those intoxicated by their own self-importance. Yet beneath the music, the small incident in the main hall was already spreading like a rumor with wings. I heard someone tried to impersonate a CEO, said a platinum blonde woman, her lips red as wine. Yes, the one beside her replied with a laugh, a brown-skinned woman claiming to be Goldman's partner. Imagine that inviting startup people to the big table now. The whole table erupted in laughter. The sound rippled like waves, but hidden within it was something else, fear disguised as mockery. Those who thought themselves untouchable always laughed the loudest, because deep down they feared the most. At the corner of the room, Preston Whitmore IV stood leaning against the bar, swirling the wine in his glass. He tried to appear calm, but his fingers trembled slightly. Part anger, part unease. He couldn't name. He had seen the look in that woman's eyes, Maya Carter, and it unsettled him in ways he couldn't explain. It wasn't the gaze of someone beneath him, but of someone who already knew how the story would end. He took a slow sip, his eyes drifting toward the stage where his mother, Eleanor Whitmore, was speaking with Senator Hawthorne and several investment chairmen. She smiled brightly, still wearing the composed air of a woman who had weathered financial storms, yet inside she was restless. Goldman said nothing about inviting her. She asked softly, forcing her voice to remain steady. Hawthorne shrugged. I've heard of Nexus Partners, a young firm but rising fast. They're managing over $300 billion, if I'm not mistaken. Eleanor froze her lips, pressing into a tight line. In an instant, the light on her face flickered out like a candle before the wind. Across the hall, Dr. Richard Thorne, his silver hair slicked back, and his smile polished like the perfect dinner guest, retold the lobby incident as if it were a comedy. She spoke about fair markets, as if we were teaching philosophy at Harvard. Honestly, in a few years, People like her will try to redefine Wall Street itself. The table burst into laughter, cold and empty, but they laughed anyway because laughter was easier than admitting fear. Outside, Maya stood in the shadowed corridor leading to the balcony. New York stretched before her, a labyrinth of light and steel. She drew a long breath, letting the night air slip through the silk draped across her shoulders. In her hand, her phone vibrated, an encrypted alert. Jericho protocol active. Confirm transfer window 22:30 Eastern Standard Time. She pressed her thumb to the screen, the glow flickering in her eyes like a flame. 30 minutes left. She didn't tremble, not because she wasn't afraid, but because even her fear had been planned. Maya had spent half her life in the shadow of families like the Whitmore's people who believed success was a birthright, not something earned. She remembered her early years at Harvard Business School, the presentations where eyes measured her before she even spoke, where the question, "Where are you from?" wasn't curiosity, but calculation, an attempt to price how much of the room she truly belonged to. She had stayed silent for years, but tonight silence would be their burden to bear. From inside, Preston stepped out to the balcony, stopping a few feet behind her, his tone low, trying to sound civil. "You know, in this world, image matters more than truth. You may be talented, but this isn't a place for people who come to expose the system's flaws." Maya turned toward him, her eyes calm as the midnight water. "I'm not exposing the flaws, Preston. I'm showing you who controls them." He chuckled uneasily. "You talk like you're threatening me." "No," she said, still gazing out at the city lights. "I'm promising you." Her phone buzzed again. A notification appeared. Market reaction. Blackwood Fund down 3.5% after hours. She pressed her lips together in a faint smile. The door just opened. Preston's face shifted. "What did you just do?" "Nothing," Maya replied. "I'm simply resetting the balance." From inside, Eleanor's commanding voice echoed. "Preston, where are you? Your partners are waiting?" He looked back toward his mother, then at Maya once more. "If you think using cheap tricks to get attention will help you, you'll regret it." "No," she said softly. "You'll regret not paying attention when it mattered." He walked away. Alone again, Maya glanced at her watch. 10:29 p.m. In that quiet moment, her thoughts drifted to her father, a small-town accountant in New Jersey, fired once for not fitting the company culture, and to her mother, who had quietly taught her that the best way to make them listen is to let them hear their own echo. She unlocked her phone and confirmed the final command. "Execute Jericho." 1 second. 2 seconds. Then the screen flashed. Transfer completed. She closed her eyes as the cold wind lifted strands of her hair. Somewhere across the world, $1.2 billion was moving in silence, like a river changing course beneath the earth. Inside, Preston had just returned to the center of the ballroom when his phone began ringing wildly. He glanced down. It was his chief financial officer voice, trembling through the line. "Preston Nexus just withdrew the entire fund, Goldman's freezing the merger." What Preston gripped the phone tighter. "That's impossible. Not only possible, it's happening right now. The market's reacting. Whitmore Holdings stock is plummeting." He stood frozen. All the sound around him vanished, leaving only the pounding of his own heart. He looked across the room and saw his mother, still smiling, still talking to their guests, completely unaware of the storm forming over her empire. The phone buzzed again, this time an automatic alert from the exchange. Whitmore Holdings down 6.8% in after-hours trading. Preston swallowed hard, his body slick with cold sweat. In that single moment, Preston Whitmore realized he had just lost what his family had spent a century building, all because of 1 second of disbelief in a woman. Out on the balcony, Maya turned and walked away from the plaza, the city lights draping her face in a veil of silver. She didn't need to look back. Behind her, the old world was beginning to crumble, number by number, belief by belief, reputation by reputation, while she stepped into the night with the steady stride of someone who had just opened the door to a new dawn. The second call came just 3 steps after Preston Whitmore re-entered the grand hall. The ringtone pierced through the golden chamber like a fire alarm. He glanced at the screen, the same name flashing again, Chief Financial Officer Andrew Bellamy. The voice on the other end was hoarse words tumbling over the rapid clicks of a keyboard. Preston listened carefully. The market's in turmoil. Rumors about Nexus Partners pulling their capital are flooding Goldman's internal networks. They're reviewing the contract as we speak. Impossible, Preston barked. Nexus is just a secondary party. They don't have the authority. Andrew cut him off. Wrong. They're the lead equity partner in this deal. If they pull out, the entire structure collapses. Goldman won't continue underwriting. Preston's grip on the phone tightened until his knuckles turned white. Around him, black tuxedos, silk gowns, diamonds, laughter, everything still sparkled in motion. Yet in his mind, the financial world was exploding. He looked up and met his mother's eyes across the room. Eleanor Whitmore's smile faltered, but he forced a shallow nod to reassure her. His face, however, betrayed the lie. From a distance, Dr. Richard Thorne noticed something was off. He approached quietly. "Everything all right, Preston?" Preston didn't answer right away. He raised his glass, drained it in one motion. "You once told me," he said quietly, voice low, "that the market always punishes the delusional." Thorne chuckled. "Yes, I did." "Why?" Preston set the glass down, his gaze hardening. "Because this time, Richard, we're the delusional ones." The words barely left his mouth when the phone buzzed again. A message from Goldman Sachs appeared on the screen. "Due to capital withdrawal from Nexus Partners, the Whitmore acquisition is under immediate review. Stand by for notice." The room tilted. Sweat gathered at the base of his neck. His throat felt scorched. He motioned for a refill, but his hand shook so badly the wine spilled halfway down his sleeve. "Preston!" His mother was suddenly beside him, her voice firm yet threaded with alarm. "What's happening?" He couldn't bring himself to answer. He simply handed her the phone. Eleanor read the message, and in that instant, the proud gleam in her eyes dimmed. Her face seemed to age 10 years in a breath. "That can't be," she whispered. "A no-name company like Nexus couldn't possibly," Mother Preston interrupted his voice. "Ruff, they're not a no-name. They're the 4th largest private equity firm in the world." Eleanor turned to him in disbelief. "And you didn't know?" Preston shook his head, unable to meet her gaze. "I'd never even heard of them. No one in our audit team mentioned a thing." Silence descended between them like a funeral veil. Around them, guests still laughed and toasted, but for Eleanor, every sound now echoed hollowly, like a celebration held at the edge of ruin. Then, like a crack spreading across glass, the disaster began to ripple outward. A staff member from Whitmore Holdings' finance division rushed in handing Preston an iPad, already displaying the live market graph. The red line of Whitmore stock was plunging straight down like a stone in free fall. Down 8%, down 12, down 17, Preston swallowed hard, eyes wide. "Suspend trading," he ordered. "We can't, sir. The halt queue is overloaded. The leak's already hit Reuters." Eleanor staggered. Thorne and Margaret Hayes rushed to steady her. "What is this?" Eleanor cried. "A coincidence? Or is someone attacking us?" Preston's eyes darted wildly, and then like a ghost he remembered that calm face, those unwavering eyes. Maya Carter, the way she'd looked at him, as if she had known exactly how this would unfold. A chill raced down his spine. "No," he whispered. "This isn't coincidence. It's a plan." Across the hall, phone alarms started ringing, one after another. A guest whispered. Another one gasped, screens lighting up in unison with the same breaking headline. "Breaking news, Nexus Partners withdraws $1.2 billion from Whitmore Holdings acquisition deal. Market shock." No one laughed anymore. No one lifted a glass. The cello music stopped mid-note, leaving a dry, ringing silence. The entire room froze, every face paling, as they realized they were standing at the epicenter of a financial earthquake. Eleanor braced her hands on the table, her voice cracking. "You have to fix this, Preston. Call Goldman. Stop the news. Save the deal." Preston nodded, dialing immediately, but the voice that answered was cold as stone. "Mr. Whitmore Goldman Sachs has officially suspended the contract. Your agreement is now deemed non-liquid." He dropped the phone. His hand trembled uncontrollably. Every sound, the footsteps, the whispers, the ragged breathing, seemed to echo from far away. Dr. Thorne hurled his glass to the floor, the shattering ring like a gunshot. "Impossible. This is sabotage. That woman, she's destroyed us." Margaret Hayes whispered. "Oh my God, I thought she just wanted attention. But she just erased us." Eleanor lifted her head, eyes sharp as forged steel. No, she couldn't have done this alone. Preston's voice came slowly, each word dragged from the depths. If she controls the capital flow, then all it takes is one touch. The room descended into chaos. Some shouted into phones for legal counsel. Others rushed toward exits to confirm the reports. The staccato of heels echoed across marble. Chairs scraped, voices shouted, "Cut CNBC now." But it was too late. The massive screen in the center of the hall flickered on. "Breaking Whitmore Holdings. Loses major investor Nexus Partners. 1.2 billion pulled. Stock plummets. 25% in after-hours trading." As the number 25 appeared on screen, Eleanor Whitmore's body went slack. She sank into her chair, clutching her glass, her eyes blank as she stared at the glowing letters of her family's downfall. Preston looked around, and for a fleeting moment, he saw his entire world, the one he had been born to inherit, fracture in complete, soundless collapse. Amid the chaos, the far doors of the hall opened. A single figure stepped inside, silent, composed. Maya Carter. The same deep blue dress, the same calm presence, but now the chandelier's light glinted off her face like the edge of an unsheathed blade. The room went still. Every eye turned toward her. She stopped in the center of the hall, her voice clear to resonant like a bell ringing through the ruins of a cathedral. "Before you blame the market," she said softly, "perhaps ask yourselves what truly makes an empire fall." Eleanor rose, trembling, her voice hoarse. What did you do?" Maya's gaze swept across the room, meeting each face. Those who had laughed, sneered, dismissed her as nothing. She smiled faintly. "I only moved the capital. What collapsed," she said, "was your faith in immortality." And in that moment, the grand hall of the plaza, once a temple of wealth and power, became a courtroom for arrogance itself. No one breathed. The grand hall of the plaza, once filled with laughter, and the clinking of champagne glasses, now echoed only with the jittering hum of hundreds of phones vibrating at once. Notifications from stock exchanges, alerts from trading desks, messages from financial advisors, all blending into a single symphony of disaster. On the massive screen, the red headline continued to flash. Whitmore Holdings stock plunges, 40% trading halted. Each falling number struck like a hammer against the legacy that the Whitmore family had built over more than a century. And in the center of the chaos, Maya Carter stood, still her frame, small yet unshaken, a fixed point amid a storm of panic. Eleanor Whitmore gripped the armrest of her chair, struggling to steady herself. You can't do this," she stammered. Maya tilted her head slightly, her voice soft, but every word slicing through the air like silk, drawn across a blade. "I haven't done anything, Mrs. Whitmore. The market is simply reacting to reality. And the reality is, your arrogance no longer holds market value." A sob broke out from a corner of the room. It was Margaret Hayes, the same woman who had earlier sneered and called Maya a waitress in the wrong hall. Now her face was ashen, her eyes glued to her phone as her personal investment portfolio evaporated by tens of millions in mere minutes. No, this can't be happening. I just reinvested this morning. Dr. Richard Thorne roared, his voice breaking. "You manipulated the market. You used insider information to sabotage the deal. I'll sue you. Maya Carter." She turned toward him, her gaze calm, chilling in its control. "Mr. Thorne, I didn't manipulate anything. I simply withdrew capital from a place where financial ethics no longer exist. If that caused an empire to fall, the fault isn't mine. It's in the rot at its foundation." The crowd around her fractured. Some people stepped back, others tucked away their phones, a few bowed their heads, not in respect, but in fear. And Preston, the man who once stood at the pinnacle of power, now stood frozen arms, limp eyes fixed on her, as if seeing a ghost. "You planned this," he said, voice trembling, "from the moment you walked in." Maya didn't deny it. "I simply came to the right place at the right time to prove the simplest truth. No one gets to define me, except me." A smattering of applause echoed through the hall. One person, then another. The wait staff, the bartenders, the janitors, the very people who had witnessed her humiliation earlier that evening. They didn't dare meet Eleanor's or Preston's eyes, but they clapped quietly, sincerely. The sound was small, yet it traveled farther than any music ever played in that hall. Eleanor hissed, her voice raw. "You think you can destroy the Whitmore family with the press of a button?" "No," Maya replied. "I don't think so. But now I know you did that yourselves. I only held up the mirror." Preston looked around and saw the faces that once smiled and praised him, now recoiling like he carried disease. He remembered Maya's gaze. No hatred, no bitterness, just a ruthless kind of understanding. It was the look of someone who had won without needing to fight. A Reuters journalist, one of the few reporters present at the gala, lifted his recorder. "Miss Carter," he asked, "is this an act of revenge or a statement?" Maya's answer was immediate, her tone calm, yet unyielding. "No one seeks revenge when they're reclaiming justice. This isn't a statement. This is the truth that the market punishes not only financial mistakes, but moral arrogance." The words rippled outward like waves. Phones lifted. People recorded, tweeted, shared. Within minutes, the hashtag #TheCarter Effect spread across social media. The world began calling her the woman who made Wall Street bow. Eleanor sank back into her chair, eyes glassy with tears, but voice still clinging to pride. You don't understand this world, Maya. We built it. You're just reaping its benefits. Maya stepped closer, her tone low but resolute. No, Mrs. Whitmore. You're wrong. This world doesn't need to be rebuilt. It just needs to be cleaned. Preston clenched his fists until his knuckles turned white. If you think pulling $1.2 billion can bring us down, you're naive. Maya smiled slowly. You're not looking closely enough, Preston. Collapse doesn't begin with numbers. It begins the moment you believe you're above respect. He opened his mouth to argue, but stopped, because he realized she was right. Their entire empire had been built on the belief that status justified cruelty, that power erased consequence. And now consequence stood before him, alive and undeniable. A staff member rushed in, trembling. So CNBC is broadcasting live, they're calling it, the Whitmore Empire Collapse. The murmurs spread across the room, like wind whistling through ashes. Eleanor rose unsteadily, her shoulders shaking. What do you want, Maya Carter? Money, fame? Or to destroy us all? Maya met her eyes. I want a lesson, not just for you, but for those who come after you, that arrogance has a price, and contempt for others is a debt no one can afford to pay. Silence swallowed the hall. The air thickened until the only sound left was the beating of hearts. Preston lowered his head. For the first time in his life, he had no words. He turned toward his mother, saw the dimming in her eyes, then back to Maya, the woman he had once called an intruder. For the first time, he didn't see her as different. He saw her as right. Maya stepped forward, drew a business card from her pocket, and placed it on the table. This is how I end old stories, Mr. Whitmore, with a signature, not a scream. Then she turned and walked away, her figure glowing under the golden light that suddenly felt dull compared to the brilliance of a woman who once had been told she didn't belong. Behind her, Eleanor bowed her head. Preston stood frozen, and those who once congratulated one another now stared down at the marble floor in silence. And as Maya's hand touched the grand door, she paused, speaking softly, her voice like the final verdict upon a fallen world. Sometimes it takes just one person being dismissed to make the entire world look at itself differently. The doors closed, and in the heavy stillness that followed, those who once believed themselves untouchable finally understood true power was never in the bloodline of the mighty, but in the hands of the ones they thought were weak. 3 hours after that night's collapse, the New York sky turned the color of steel. The entire city glowed with the cold white light of Bloomberg, CNBC, Reuters, and the Wall Street Journal screens, all carrying the same headline: Whitmore Holdings, Collapse Nexus. Partners withdraws $1.2 billion. Goldman confirms termination. On the 54th floor of Whitmore headquarters, where glass walls once mirrored the pride of a financial empire, only crimson screens remained. Stock charts plunged like a heart monitor, flatlining. Preston Whitmore IV sat in the dark, still wearing his expensive jacket, tie loosened, eyes red. He stared at his laptop as red numbers flashed like laughter: minus 28%, minus 35%, minus 42%. A century-old empire had fallen in a single night. He said nothing, only sat still. A cold cup of coffee rested before him, and beside it, a phone rattled non-stop with hundreds of missed calls from the board, from Goldman, from public relations advisors, from the friends who had once raised glasses with him at the Gala. No one called to ask if he was all right. There was only one question. Is this real? Behind him, Eleanor Whitmore stood by the window, her trembling hand pressed to the glass. Far below, crowds swelled, and headlights braided together like tangled arteries. She had believed power could be inherited, like shares, like titles. Now she understood. Power without respect is only a ghost. How could you let this happen? She asked, her voice rough, no longer angry. Preston lifted his head, his eyes hollow. I thought I was running a company, Mother. But I was only holding someone else's legacy. And now it's ash. The door burst open. Dr. Richard Thorne rushed in, face pale, but still posing composure. They're talking about firing you, Preston. The board meets in an emergency session tonight. And I just lost my entire stake. Preston let out a brittle laugh. Welcome to the real world, Richard, where money can't shield arrogance. Thorne slammed a file onto the table. She has to be stopped. We have to sue to hit back in the press. We cannot let a single woman destroy the Whitmore line over a bruised ego. Eleanor turned her gaze like ice. No, Richard. You don't understand. She didn't act out of ego. She acted for the truth. Silence settled over the room. Preston looked at his mother, as if seeing her for the first time, not as a queen, but as an aging woman witnessing the end of her reign. Eleanor sighed and turned away. When we treat people as if they don't deserve to be heard, the world will eventually stop listening to us. Outside, the season's first snow began to fall. Each flake touched the glass and melted into a long, thin trail, as if the city itself were crying. Meanwhile, in Chicago, the 60th floor of Nexus Partners burned with midnight light. Maya Carter's team worked through the night video conferences, tying Zurich, Singapore, and Tokyo together. On the central screen, CNBC broadcast the scene at the plaza, live Preston, with his head bowed, Eleanor silent, and a scrolling banner that read, "The Fall of a Dynasty, the Rise of Nexus." Maya sat by the window with a cup of hot tea. She did not smile. Her heart felt no glee, only a strange quiet. She had imagined satisfaction at the sight of their collapse, but watching those desperate eyes, she understood justice is not joy. It is stillness. The office door opened. Chloe, her assistant, hurried in, voice bright with triumph. "Dr. Carter, the market is praising you. The hashtag The Carter Effect is #1 on Twitter. Goldman sends congratulations. Kenji Tanaka of Ronin Capital confirms the transfer of $1.2 billion per your order. The press wants interviews immediately." Maya set the cup down, her gaze drifting over the misted Chicago skyline. "Chloe," she said slowly, "tell them I'm not a hero. I'm simply a person who stopped enduring." Chloe fell quiet. She had never seen her boss so tired, not in body, but in spirit. "Do you think they'll understand your message?" Chloe asked. Maya turned back with a faint, wistful smile. "Not right away. People usually listen only when pain knocks at their own door. But at least today, someone downstairs might think twice before calling a stranger starve because of their skin." The next morning, front pages aligned in unison. A $1 billion reckoning, the woman who shook Wall Street. The image of Maya Carter walking through the plaza's doors, her silhouette lit by a storm of camera flashes, became a new emblem of power rising above prejudice. Meanwhile, Whitmore Holdings kept falling. The board convened in emergency session and forced Preston to resign. Bronze statues in the main lobby were taken down. Major shareholders withdrew. Partners terminated agreements in a cascade. In Manhattan, Eleanor's penthouse glowed dimly in the first light of dawn. She sat alone with a cold cup of tea. A newspaper lay on the table, Maya's image filling the front page. Eleanor traced the photo with a trembling finger. "She has your father's eyes," she whispered. Preston looked up. "My father? He once told me something I never understood," Eleanor said. "When power makes us stop seeing people, that power becomes a chain. Now I understand." Preston said nothing. He no longer argued or defended. Something inside him had broken, and at the same time, something else began to be rebuilt, slowly, quietly, with painful clarity. Eleanor rose and placed a hand on her son's shoulder. "You have to meet her." For what he asked, exhausted, to apologize, and to relearn how to begin from zero. Across the country in Chicago, Maya was in a strategy council meeting when her phone rang. The screen read, "Unknown caller, New York." She hesitated, then answered. A man's voice came through, hoarse, yet familiar. "Dr. Carter, this is Preston Whitmore." She closed her eyes briefly, not surprised, only subdued. "Are you calling to threaten a lawsuit?" His voice shook. "No. I'm calling to say thank you." She said nothing. "I lost everything last night." He continued, "But for the first time, I can see how blind I've been. I don't know if you'll believe me, but you made me understand that pride isn't an inheritance, it's a hereditary illness." Maya answered softly, like a passing breeze. "If you truly understand, use the ashes to light something new." When she ended the call, morning light spilled across the glass, reflecting the image of Maya Carter, the woman once ordered out of a lobby for not belonging, now a mirror for the world to see itself more clearly. A week had passed since the Plaza night, the event the media called the financial earthquake of the century. Wall Street was still reeling. Financial networks replayed over and over the moment Maya Carter walked out of that grand hall, her steps calm her eyes, neither angry nor proud, carrying only the quiet certainty of someone who had proven a truth without raising her voice. The story spread across the world, a brown-skinned woman, expelled from a billionaire's gala, who then brought down a 100-year empire with a single decision. But what the world discussed most wasn't the collapse of the stock, it was the moral message hidden inside it. In Manhattan, the headquarters of Whitmore Holdings looked like the wreck of a ship. The company's logo had been stripped from the building, offices stood half-empty, and employees left in small groups. Preston Whitmore sat alone in the conference room that once held 12 leather chairs, now only 2 remained. He opened his laptop. On the screen was the latest headline, "Bloomberg Whitmore Dynasty Files for Chapter 11, End of an Era." Under the cold light of a winter afternoon, Preston looked like a different man, clean-shaven hair, disheveled, his eyes drained of the command that once defined them. He opened a drawer and pulled out the business card Maya Carter had left behind that night. Dr. Maya Carter, founder and CEO, Nexus Partners. Below a line of italicized text read, "Integrity is not an asset. It's a foundation." He stared at the words, as though touching a wound still healing. The door opened. Eleanor Whitmore entered, holding a folder. She still carried her elegance, but her back was slightly bent. Her eyes subdued. "I brought the liquidation papers," she said quietly. "Tomorrow they'll seal the building." Preston nodded. "I know." Eleanor sat, glancing around the empty room. "Do you know what hurts me the most?" He stayed silent. "It's not the money," she said, her voice trembling. "It's realizing that all my life I never truly listened to anyone. I only listened to reply, to prove I was right." A tear fell onto the papers. "Miss Carter did what no one in the market ever dared. She made me see myself. Preston took a frail hand. Maybe, he said, that's how real justice works. It doesn't destroy us with violence. It humbles us with awareness. Meanwhile, in Chicago, Maya Carter was preparing for her first press conference since the collapse. The Nexus Partners headquarters was alive with movement. Across the glass wall, bright lights illuminated the words, "The future is ethical capitalism." She stood backstage, gazing at the curtain. Around her, the room buzzed with reporters, cameras, and producers giving last-minute instructions. But Maya wasn't looking at the crowd. She was looking at herself in the mirror. Her eyes ringed with exhaustion, yet clearer than ever. Dr. Carter, her assistant Chloe, approached Goldman Bloomberg Reuters. "Even the BBC are live. Would you like to review your speech one last time?" Maya shook her head softly. "No, I'll speak from the heart." The stage doors opened, light flooded in, and the applause rose like a wave. Maya stepped forward, her pace steady, her voice deep and calm through the microphone. "Last week I withdrew $1.2 billion from a single deal. Somehow that decision made the world talk about fairness, prejudice, and arrogance. But today I want to talk about something else, responsibility." The hall fell silent. She paused, took a breath. "Throughout my career, I've seen hundreds of deals collapse over wrong numbers. But only one kind of mistake can bring down an entire financial culture, the mistake in how we see other people." She walked slowly across the stage. That night at the plaza, when I was told to use the staff entrance, I didn't feel anger. I saw an opportunity to prove that value isn't defined by invitations, but by how we respond to rejection. Her tone grew stronger, and I didn't retaliate. I simply chose where to invest, places where competence is respected, more than color, where integrity is valued more than legacy. That wasn't revenge. That was the law of a fair market. Reporters scribbled, some nodding quietly. She stopped at the podium, lowering her voice. For too long, finance has prided itself on the idea that everything has a price. But there are things that once lost cannot be bought back. Trust. And when those in power forget that the market will rebalance itself. Applause thundered through the hall. Maya bowed slightly, her eyes warm. Yet inside she felt no victory, only peace. The kind of peace she had been denied through years of fighting against bias. That evening, Maya sat alone in her office, gazing at the Chicago skyline. Snow fell softly, and the city lights reflected off the glass, forming 1,000 halos of light. She opened her laptop. In her inbox, an unread message waited. From Preston Whitmore. Subject: one question. If you had the chance, would you do it differently? She sat still, her fingers resting on the keyboard. Finally, she typed 3 words: no. And thank you. She hit send, leaned back, and closed her eyes. She thought of her father, the man who once told her, "You can't choose where you start, but you can choose how you move forward." She realized. The plaza night wasn't just a turning point in her career, but a pivot for an entire culture of business, where justice no longer needed a gavel, only the light of truth. Somewhere across the city, thousands of women people of color, those once overlooked, were reading her story. They saw themselves in it, not in victory, but in the belief that at last they too could walk into the room without asking permission. Maya Carter closed her eyes and smiled faintly in the quiet night. Outside, the snow kept falling, but this time it carried no cold. It carried a promise that the old world was melting away and the dawn of fairness was finally drawing near. 12 months after that historic night at the plaza, New York entered winter once more. Snow blanketed Madison Avenue, reflecting the soft golden glow from the skyscrapers above. Yet amid the chill, a new sign appeared at the corner of the street, white letters engraved into grey stone. The Whitmore Carter Institute for Ethical Leadership. No one could have imagined that two names once at war would stand side by side on the same plaque. But it was true the year the financial world changed forever. Inside the building, Dr. Maya Carter stood before a grand auditorium filled with students, young entrepreneurs and scholars gathered for the Institute's inaugural lecture. On stage, she wore a white blazer, her expression calm yet vibrant. In the front row sat Preston Whitmore, now 46, quiet and humble. Gone were the tailored suits, the bodyguards, the flashing cameras. He wore a simple blue shirt, his face more lined, his gaze soft with humility. Maya saw him and gave a small nod. It was a gesture of forgiveness, unspoken, but powerful enough to still the entire room. Exactly 1 year ago, she began, a woman was told, to use the back entrance of a hotel because people thought she didn't belong there. She walked through the front door instead, and as a result, the world had to open more doors for those who came after her. A gentle ripple of laughter passed through the crowd, but Maya's eyes remained steady. But that story wasn't about victory. It was about transformation. Because over this past year, I've learned that revenge only extinguishes anger, but forgiveness can light an entire generation. The hall fell silent. Preston bowed his head, hands clasped together. He knew she was speaking not just of herself, but of him. A year ago, after Whitmore Holdings declared bankruptcy, Preston had vanished from the public eye. He sold his penthouse, withdrew to a small town in Maine, wrote letters of apology to every former employee, and donated his remaining assets to immigrant startup funds. No one expected his return until Maya received a handwritten letter. The ink slightly unsteady. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking to learn how to listen. 3 months later, he appeared in her office at Nexus, carrying a proposal to establish a non-profit institute, one that would train young leaders in ethics, fairness, and compassion. Maya had looked at him for a long time before saying only one sentence: "If you truly want to learn, start by teaching others." During today's opening ceremony, Maya spoke not only of justice, but of what comes after it. Justice doesn't end when someone falls, she said. It begins when the fallen rise and choose not to repeat their mistakes. And if we truly want a healthy economy, we must redefine the word success, not by profit, but by its positive impact on people. The hall erupted in applause. Preston lifted his head, the light catching in his eyes as though he were being baptized in it. After the ceremony, Maya stepped outside. Snow had begun to fall again. Preston approached her beneath the leafless trees, their breaths mingling in the cold air. "You know," he said softly, "every time I see the words Whitmore Carter on that sign, I still feel undeserving." Maya smiled. "No one deserves redemption immediately. But you chose what's right. That's where it begins." He paused, then asked, "Do you ever regret bringing us down?" She looked up at the sky, snowflakes settling on her lashes. "Yes. A little. But not because of what happened, because I once believed justice had to come through someone else's pain. Later I realized true justice helps people see the truth and still gives them a chance to change." Preston gave a small, sad smile. "You gave me that chance." "No," Maya said gently. "You gave it to yourself. I just opened the door." That afternoon, Maya returned to her office, where young fellows were debating the topic ethics in financial leadership. She listened quietly as they spoke, voices still unpolished, but sincere, a stark contrast to the cold boardrooms of the old world. One student raised her hand. "Dr. Carter, if fairness and ethics are so important, why do people in power still abuse it?" Maya smiled. "Because people fear losing control. What they don't realize is that true power isn't about controlling others, it's about mastering yourself." She paused, her gaze distant. "I've met people who believed they could buy the world with money. But they forgot that the world wasn't built on gold. It was built on trust. And when trust disappears, everything else turns to paper." The audience rose in a long round of applause. Maya bowed slightly, her eyes glimmering under the warm golden light. That night she left the institute late. The snow was heavier now. On the street, bright billboards glowed against the sky. A massive screen across Times Square displayed a special report: Maya Carter, the woman who rebuilt trust on Wall Street. She stopped, the wind brushing through her hair. The line scrolling beneath the headline made her smile faintly. From the plaza to the world. The woman who made humanity believe that fairness is not an ideal, it's a strategy. She took out her phone, reading a new message from Preston. "I'm in Maine. The snow is beautiful. You were right, peace doesn't come from power, it comes from having the courage to start again." She typed back 3 words: "Keep building, Preston." Then Maya looked up at the sky. Snow continued to fall, white and silent, layering gently over the cracks of the old world. In that light, she knew a new era had begun. Not the era of the powerful, but of those who choose to listen. And on that snowy night, Maya's footsteps echoed through the quiet streets, each one like the heartbeat of a world being born again, a world where compassion is capital and integrity is profit. Another year passed, and the world had changed more than anyone expected. Financial conferences that were once closed circles now opened their doors to the new generation, faces of every color, every background, every story. People called it the Carter effect, not just a historical event, but a turning point in global awareness. Success was no longer defined by inheritance, but by the measure of one's character. At the Future of Finance conference in Zurich, Maya Carter walked onto the stage with her usual simplicity. When the host asked if you could go back to that night at the plaza, what would you say to the hotel staff who told you to use the back entrance? She smiled softly and replied, "I'd thank him." The entire hall went silent. Then she continued, her voice gentle as mist, yet cutting like glass. "Because without that humiliation, I might never have seen the limits I needed to break. Sometimes the doors that close on us aren't meant to keep us out. They're meant to push us to build new ones for everyone else." The audience erupted in applause. Amid the flashes of cameras, Maya didn't see celebration. She saw young faces, bright eyes, free from the fear of judgment. That night, back in her hotel room, she opened her laptop and looked at the new logo of the Whitmore Carter Institute glowing on the screen. Beneath the words, "Integrity Builds," Empires was an image of snow falling over the domes of Chicago. She exhaled softly, her heart as light as the wind. In the end, it was no longer about revenge or victory. It was transformation. She remembered her father's old words: "You can't force people to respect you, but you can make them see you." Tonight, she knew she had done exactly that. She hadn't just made them see her, she had made them see themselves, reflected in their own mistakes. Outside, Zurich's snow fell fine as silk. She smiled faintly, poured another cup of tea, her gaze distant, yet at peace. On the television mounted on the wall, the news ticker scrolled a quiet line. Whitmore Carter Institute expands to 12 countries. Preston Whitmore named Inspiration of the Year. Maya watched and nodded gently. In her eyes there was no anger, left only gratitude, because from the ashes, humanity had been reborn. She turned off the lights, letting the city glow filter through the curtains. In the stillness of the night, the only sound was the soft whisper of snow against the glass, falling slowly, as if speaking a truth she already knew. When justice ceases to punish it, becomes light. 3 years after the Plaza night, the world was no longer the same. Top business schools now taught the Carter model as a timeless case study in ethical leadership. On Wall Street, people still told the story of the woman who was once told to use the back entrance, but who walked straight through the front door and changed the way the world viewed power. At the Global Leadership Summit in Washington, D.C., Maya Carter stepped onto the stage to receive the award for Pioneer of the Decade. Golden light washed over her face, but in Maya's eyes, the real light wasn't in the crystal trophy. It was in the thousands of young people standing before her, those who dared to dream, to speak, and to cross the invisible lines of prejudice. She spoke briefly, her voice gentle yet firm. The day I was told to use the back door, I realized that sometimes the world doesn't need a hero. It just needs someone brave enough not to look away. At the back of the hall, Preston Whitmore stood silently, his eyes filled with calm pride. When Maya stepped down, they shook hands, not as victor and defeated, but as two human beings who had learned that justice doesn't destroy the past. It redeems the future. That night, Maya walked out of the auditorium and stood in the cool wind of the Capitol, gazing at the lights shimmering over the surface of the Potomac River. The world was still noisy, still imperfect, but for the first time, she felt peace. Because she knew that true light isn't found in victory. It is found in the way we choose to keep walking, even when no one is watching. From the perspective of an expert in ethical leadership and corporate culture, the journey of Maya Carter is not just a story about power, but a testament to the transformation of an entire era. An era where integrity begins to replace privilege, and humanity becomes the most sustainable form of capital. She did not destroy the old empire, she forced it to look into a mirror, to face the very darkness it had long hidden beneath the glitter of prestige. Her story reminds us that true justice does not need to roar. It only needs one person brave enough to stand still, still enough to make the world listen. If you believe that respect and fairness can still reshape the way people treat one another, then, like this video to spread that message. Subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the journeys where dignity shines through the dark, and leave a comment below with the phrase that captures your belief. Keep integrity.